So today we're going to do a comparison between the LG G40 and the Mate 20. So the LG has two front-facing lenses. One of them is an 8 megapixel and the other one is a 5 megapixel, which is a little bit of a bummer, but then again, I would rather have two, one wide and one normal. This is a low light portion to see which one is better. Of course, the sound is also coming from these cameras to see which audio is better as well. Front-facing portrait mode, I would say the Mate 20 has a better shade with the blues in the sky and it's a bit warmer, and the LG V40 gives me a slight shade of green on my skin, while the Mate 20 is a lot more highlighted and washed out in the background versus the V40. When you point at a light source with the Mate 20, it gives off a really weird shape. Both of these phones produces different colors. I find that the Mate 20 has a lot more contrasty looks in its pictures, while the V40 has less contrast and in the shadows it's a bit brighter. Now moving on to aperture mode. It's aperture mode on Mate 20 and portrait mode on the V40. And I want to see how well they capture the structures and objects of everyday things. Throughout my testing, I do find the Mate 20 does a little bit of a better job cutting off of the edges on the very top of the picture. You can tell that it's nice and blurry, while when you move down to the picture, you can tell that the V40 cuts it off and it seems more focused than the Mate 20. Now texture wise, I would say the Mate 20 wins. As you can tell, looking at the floor, there's a lot more texture and a lot more detail than the V40. Moving on to low light, they both produce really good low light pictures. I find that with the LG, it does produce better colors in plants and greenery, but sometimes the LG gives off this weird green light where the Mate 20 neutralizes and color balances that out. Now taking a look at that building on the left, you can tell that the green cast is happening on that building, but then again, look at the plants. It's so much more vibrant. And here is a big example of how much more vibrant that green is on the LG V40. With the 1080p walking test, both of these cameras do really good. Now the dynamic range I would say is a little bit better on the Mate 20, but it's not a huge difference. Same with the pictures, the Mate 20 gives off a really weird shape when pointing at the sun, whereas the V40 looks normal. For a 4K stabilization test, it comes down to the electronic stabilization on the Mate 20 versus the optical on the V40. I think that the Mate 20 has a little bit of that jello look, whereas the LG gives off that jerky motion. They both do really well. It's not that you will find it unless you really look for it, so it's more of a preference thing. Now where you can really see it is when you're recording with the ultra wide angle view. At this point, I would just give it straight to the LG V40. It has a better stabilization on the ultra wide angle lens. Same with the pictures, the Mate 20 gives off that contrasty look, whereas the V40 is less contrasty. You can see more in the shadows, and again, the greenery, leaves, and the yellows, it's more vibrant. Low light 1080p stabilization test. The winner is the LG V40. There's a lot less jitter, it's more clear, the flaring or whatever you're pointing at, the lights or whatever, they have a nice shape versus the Mate 20. Moving on to the 4K section, again, LG wins. The electronic stabilization on the Mate 20 does a really poor job in low light. The names on the bricks are really blurry and jittery, you can't really make it out. Now the colors, the green on the LG of course pops out, while the Mate 20 looks a bit more muted. Now shooting with the ultra wide angle, the Mate 20 seems to have low shutter speed. It looks a bit more jittery and choppy, where the LG is pretty smooth. There's a lot of noise and artifacts on both images, but then again, I would say the artifacts are more apparent on the LG, whereas it's a little bit more blurry and muted on the Mate 20. So the V40 can shoot in 4K 60 frames per second. Here's just a comparison between 30 frames per second on the Mate 20, 60 on the V40. Here the 60 frames per second on the LG doesn't have any stabilization at all, but still it's a bit more clear. The colors again are still vibrant on the greenery. So shooting in 60 frames per second isn't too bad until you reach at a really low light situation. You can't really see anything, it's pretty much pitch black in the shadows. So I would avoid shooting in 60 frames per second unless you have strong city lights. So overall, both of these cameras can give you a lot of options to shoot. For video right now, hands down the LG, it has better manual controls and it does better in low light as well. Oh, it can also shoot in 60 frames per second, which is a plus for me. For photos, you can't go wrong with either or. I would say if you want more of a contrasty look, then the Mate 20 can do it, whereas in the LG V40, the colors are more vibrant. So this is my comparison. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.